This is a story from 2010 that in the Taliban's most powerful and central body, the Quetta Shura, nominated by Mullah Umar, a Taliban commander, came to his commander, that is the in charge of the military commission, to take money and weapons for his fighters and for his fronts. The in charge of the military commission told him that they have nothing to give because they themselves are waiting for some money and resources to come from another shura so that they can transfer it to further to their subordinate organizations and to their fronts. Now the thing to think about, friends, is that after such a successful spring offensive in 2006, whose story you have seen in the previous episode, what happened that the Quetta Shura became so weak? In fact, if you ask the truth, friends, by 2013, the Quetta Shura, that is the Rahbari Shura, had almost reached the verge of ending. Actually, the reason for this was those variables of time which remain hidden in the box of the era and are usually not visible. So the difficulty that came upon them started because of Mullah Dadullah. Now, Mullah Dadullah was the head of the military commission in the Quetta Shura. Almost everyone feared him. On 13 May 2007, it happened that he was called to Helmand for a meeting. When he reached there with some of his companions, NATO and Afghan forces were already aware of his arrival. They opened fire on Mullah Dadullah and his team. He was hit by 3 bullets, but one bullet that hit the back of his head proved fatal. Mullah Dadullah was a very charismatic Taliban commander. He knew very well the art of keeping fighters united and making them fight. So his death caused severe damage to the Taliban's Central Military Commission. His death was such big news for the Afghan government, friends, that the Governor of Kandahar, Asadullah, placed Mullah Dadullah's body in his official residence for public display so that everyone could know that the Mullah Dadullah was no more. In the place of Mullah Dadullah, his brother Mullah Mansur Dadullah was then made the head of the military commission in the Shura, but obviously he was not the commander of his brother's level, so he could not fill the gap in the eyes of the fighters. But friends, this gap seemed to be filled at the time when a proven Taliban military commander was released from America's infamous prison Guantanamo Bay. This commander was Abdul Qayyum Zakir, whom people knew as Mullah Zakir. With his arrival in 2010, the leadership gap of the military commission could have been filled. But the problem with him was that in stature and experience he was in no way less than the head of the Quetta Shura, Mullah Abdul Ghani brother. Then since he had been released from Guantanamo Bay, his value had increased even more in the eyes of the fighters, but the problem was that he did not get along with Mullah brother at all. So when he was accepted unopposed as the head of the military commission and he started making various kinds of changes and the Taliban's war fronts, the disagreements that had started between him and Mullah brother became intense. Abdul Qayyum Zakir actually wanted to give more authority to field commanders instead of provincial governors, whereas Mullah brother thought otherwise. After this, Mullah Abdul Ghani brother was also in favor of negotiations with the Afghan government and was trying for those negotiations to happen, whereas Mullah Zakir was strongly against it. He did not want these negotiations at that time. When he came to the Quetta Shura immediately after his release from Guantanamo Bay, he also had full support of Pakistani agencies, so he had that power. He also had relations with Iran. He had very good ties with Saudi Arabia, and some donors from there were also with him. So the conflict between the two senior leaders, Mullah Abdul Ghani brother and Mullah Zakir, was the second major point due to which the Quetta Shura started to weaken. At that time, Pakistan did not want that if the time for negotiations ever came, Pakistan would be left out and direct negotiations would take place between the Taliban in America or between the Taliban and the Afghan government, leading to a result that might not be favorable for Pakistan. That is why Pakistan had maintained relations with both the Taliban Shuras and the Afghan government from the very beginning. Iran was doing the same. Arab countries, China and Russia were also doing the same, but obviously Pakistan was a major player in this great game. When Mullah Zakir saw that Mullah brother was negotiating with the Afghan government on his own and was not letting his war strategy prevail, at some points he leaked this information to his Pakistani sources. All the donors of the Quetta Shura understood that if this central body was to remain active, then the will of only one of the two leaders could prevail. There cannot be two kings in one jungle. What happened was that in 2010, a high-value secret operation took place in Karachi. Now see, the interesting thing that both CIA and Pakistani agency personnel took part in it. A raid was conducted, and in that raid, many important Taliban figures were arrested. Among those arrested were Mullah Abdul Qayyum Zakir and Mullah brother. There was no significant coverage of this news in the Pakistani media, even though the most active and top leaders of the Taliban had been arrested. Only Dawn News published a small report and gave some detail, but the rest of the media remained silent. American newspapers were surprised as to why this was happening. But even more surprising, friends, was that after a few days, without any explanation, Mullah Abdul Qayyum Zakir was released, who returned to head the military commission in the Quetta Shura, while Mullah brother was not only kept under continuous detention, but despite repeated demands by the Americans, neither was access given to him nor was he handed over to the United States. He remained in prison for 8 years, a large part of which he spent under house arrest. Now we know that when the US Special Representative for Afghanistan, Zalmay Khalilzad, recommended it, Mullah Abdul Ghani brother was released after 8 years so that he could represent the Taliban in the Doha negotiations. These were two reasons for the weakening of the Quetta Shura. One, a commander like Mullah Dadullah was killed, and second, the most important political leader of the Taliban, Mullah Umar's closest companion, Mullah brother, was arrested. But besides these two, there were two major factors that completely broke the backbone of the Quetta Shura. But see the irony, although the Quetta Shura was weakened, these same factors helped the Taliban establish themselves in eastern, western and northern Afghanistan. You must have seen in 2010 and 2011 such maps suddenly appearing on TV screens, online articles and newspapers showing in different colors which areas of Afghanistan the Taliban had established themselves in, how many districts and provinces they controlled, where they merely had presence, where their war machinery was established, where their network existed, and so on. These maps also started after the arrest of Mullah Brother through the efforts of those Taliban shuras that did not follow the orders of the Quetta Shura. Now, what were these factors? To understand this, you need to know about the Taliban's greatest strength, Jalaluddin Haqqani. Jalaluddin Haqqani was one of those figures of the Afghan Jihad who had legendary status. During the war against the Soviet Union, American officials had close relations with him. US President Ronald Reagan used to call him a freedom fighter, and even the CIA considered him its most important asset. His headquarters was in Miranshah, Pakistan, where his central body, the Miranshah Shura, was also established. Along with that, he was extremely powerful in the eastern Afghan provinces of Logar, Nangarhar, Khost, and Paktia. When the US overthrew the Taliban government, and the Haqqani group troubled the Americans most. You already know that even months before the formation of the Quetta Shura, his fighters had started fighting against the United States. Then when the Rahbari Shura, that is, the Quetta Shura, was established, the Haqqanis were also given representation in it. In 2006 Spring offensive, the Haqqanis participated as the most powerful military wing of the Taliban. But after that campaign, differences between the Quetta Shura and the Haqqanis began to grow. The real issue was that Jalaluddin Haqqani's son Sirajuddin Haqqani was not satisfied with his representation in the Quetta Shura. He believed that the way the Taliban were attacking the Americans was too slow. His idea was that all Taliban commanders in Afghanistan should have access to the central body where they could present their attack ideas, and then senior commanders could refine those ideas and carry out operations with better planning and resources at the organizational level. He also complained that the Quetta Shura had become satisfied by creating a large named military commission in which all local Taliban commanders were independently planning and executing operations, whereas the opposing commanders did not have the experience of senior commanders. So their attacks often failed, causing loss of fighters' lives and waste of money. Sirajuddin Haqqani also believed that the Taliban should work on new methods of suicide attacks and guerrilla war. He wanted to bring all these changes and had many such plans, but the Quetta Shura rejected his proposals every time. He was not happy about this. He also complained that when he accepted the authority of the Quetta Shura, he was not receiving his fair share of dollars and funds. These were his thoughts and grievances, but until 2006, his words were just words because of his father Jalaluddin Haqqani was the real decision maker. In the presence of such a charismatic commander, no one else's opinion prevailed. But after 2006, the situation changed. In 2007, Jalaluddin Haqqani, whose health had been poor for a long time, handed over the entire management of the Miranshah Shura, that is the Haqqani network, to his son Sirajuddin Haqqani and retired. This was the turning point. Now Sirajuddin Haqqani was the head of a powerful Shura. He also had another complaint against the Quetta Shura, which was actually a secret, that they considered the Haqqanis as military partners but not political partners. They trusted them for attacks but did not include them in decisions about negotiations. This dissatisfaction led Sirajuddin Haqqani to announce separation from the Quetta Shura on 7 August 2007, restoring the independent status of the Miran Shura. Regarding funds, they already had their own sources. By 2008, they collected $66 million from Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and private Arab sources, and also received about 20 million annually from Al Qaeda. Because of ties with Al Qaeda, they also gained access to fighters from groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba, TTP, Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, as well as fighters from Central Asia, Chechnya, and Arab regions. Due to all this, the intensity of Haqqani network attacks increased significantly, and with more intense operations, they received more funding. They also became capable of countering night raids by purchasing night Googles from the black market. Tough drone attacks remained a major challenge. An advisor of Sirajuddin Haqqani once said in an interview that without drones they couldn't take over of Afghanistan in a month. They also received training and funding from Iran's Revolutionary Guards along with support from Pakistani advisors. Their representatives, along with those of other Afghan shuras, also operated from an office in Mashhad, Iran, which served as a coordination hub. By 2013, they had established several commissions, including a Fadayan Commission of Suicide Attackers, mostly aged 14 to 23, trained intensively for 3 months. Other units included mine-laying teams and rapid attacks squads. These modern guerrilla tactics were learned from Vietnam, South America, and the Soviet war experiences. Because of all this, the Haqqani network became a highly powerful force, blamed for major attacks such as those on the American Embassy, Indian Embassy, Intercontinental Hotel, and Serena Hotel. So friends, the separation of the Haqqani network was the third major factor that weakened the Quetta Shura but also strengthened the Taliban in eastern Afghanistan. Remember, the Taliban were a brand of Afghan resistance used by different groups, while the Shuras and fronts were smaller networks operating within their spheres. They were not necessarily enemies of each other. They had differences and sometimes conflicts, but all agreed on one goal: to expel the Americans and keep political leadership with the Quetta Shura, nominated by Mullah Omar. This was a complex situation. Now the fourth major factor was the Peshawar Shura, which financially weakened the Quetta Shura but also helped separate the Taliban across Afghanistan. What was the Peshawar Shura? How did it emerge? Who ran it? Why did it become so powerful? At that time, 2010 to 2012, Taliban fighters also started questioning their leaders. Where is Mullah Omar? Who will lead after Baradr's arrest? Why is Mullah Omar not clarifying? Why isn't there no decision in the conflict between Zakir and Akhtar Mansour? So what was the real story behind all this? When did Mullah Omar die? Who hid it, and for how long? When did Afghanistan and Afghan forces learn the truth? How was a new leader chosen? And how was the next leader killed so quickly in a drone strike? What role did Mullah Omar's son Muhammad Yaqub play? We will discuss all this in the next part, as the video has already become quite long. Thank you.